New York City is home to some of the most iconic skyscrapers in the world, including the Empire State Building. Completed nearly 100 years ago, the Art Deco masterpiece was the tallest building in the world for over 40 years. But the Empire State Building wasn't just a status symbol for the United States. It was designed to function as its own vertical city, complete with retail shops, restaurants, observation decks, and even a mooring mast for airships. And today, despite being almost a century old, the building generates over $500 million a year, making it one of the most profitable buildings in the world. In fact, it's even more profitable per square foot than some of the world's most expensive modern skyscrapers. So how did such an old building become so profitable, and why do modern skyscrapers have trouble competing with it? Well, to understand the genius economics of the Empire State Building, we first have to go back to the 1920s, when New York City was undergoing a major construction boom. You see, up until the early 20th century, the tallest buildings in the world were limited to around 10 stories. This was mainly because up until the 1800s, the only way to construct tall buildings was with masonry materials, such as stone or brick. But as technology improved and steel became a more viable material, architects started experimenting with building larger structures. However, there was still a lot that they didn't know about constructing steel buildings. So many early attempts at tall steel frame buildings ended up collapsing, but eventually, engineers figured out how to make steel buildings taller and stronger. This led to a construction boom of tall buildings throughout the United States and Europe, but few cities took advantage of this innovation quite like New York City. See, New York City had always been a densely populated city, but by the 1900s, it was quickly becoming the center of American business. Unfortunately, though, the city didn't really have the infrastructure to support such rapid growth. There simply wasn't enough land to build all the office space that businesses wanted. This created a real estate shortage, which drove prices to insane levels. So, to combat this, New York City started experimenting with a new idea, the skyscraper. By building upwards instead of outwards, developers could pack more density into a smaller area. This not only helped alleviate the housing shortage, but also gave businesses cheaper access to office space. In the beginning, skyscrapers weren't all that tall, but they quickly started getting taller and taller. By the 1920s, developers were already building 50-story skyscrapers, and this is when William Van Allen was hired to design the world's next great skyscraper. Of course, you probably know the building we're talking about, the Empire State Building. At the time, New York City had strict building regulations. The setback law required that the width of a building had to increase as it got taller. This was put in place to ensure that large buildings didn't block too much sunlight from reaching the streets below. At first glance, it might seem like these regulations would limit how tall a building could get, but it actually incentivized architects to build taller and thinner buildings. And this is exactly what William Van Allen did with the Empire State Building. By building a very tall and very thin building, he was able to maximize the amount of office space while minimizing the amount of setbacks. Now, while this was great for maximizing profits, it also came with a serious challenge: financial viability. Adding height to a building is relatively cheap. The additional floors don't take up that much extra space, and they only require a small fraction of the budget to build. That being said, the higher up you go, the more expensive it gets. The added construction difficulty, increased material costs, and specialized equipment all add up fast. Not only that, but the upper floors also take up less and less space due to the setbacks. As such, developers usually don't find it worth it to go super high. But then what determines how high is super high? Well, it depends on several factors such as construction costs, building materials, and the intended use of the building. But generally speaking, the break-even point tends to occur somewhere between 60 and 80 floors. So when designing the Empire State Building, William Van Allen had to carefully consider how tall he should build. He knew that if he built too low, he wouldn't be able to make his money back. But if he built too high, he'd end up with an unusable top floor and lose money. Fortunately for Van Allen, John J. Raskob, the owner of the Empire State Building, was extremely wealthy and didn't mind taking on some risk. With Raskob's backing, Van Allen was able to design the world's tallest building, measuring a whopping 1,250 feet or 381 meters, with 102 floors of premium office space. The Empire State Building was well on its way to becoming the most profitable building in the world. But before we talk about how the Empire State Building made its fortune, I want to quickly talk about our sponsor. But now let's get back to the video. Now, when it comes to real estate, The location of a building is arguably the most important factor in determining its value, and the Empire State Building has one of the best locations possible. It's located in Midtown Manhattan, which is widely regarded as the best area for a skyscraper. Not only does it have convenient access to public transportation, but it's also close to many of the world's leading corporations. This has allowed the Empire State Building to maintain a 95% occupancy rate since opening, which is one of the main reasons it's so profitable. The location also played a crucial role in the construction of the building. See, when building a skyscraper, it's important to make sure that the foundation can handle the added weight. Now, while bedrock can be found relatively shallow in Midtown Manhattan, it becomes much deeper as you move south towards the financial district. This means that constructing a skyscraper would be much more difficult and expensive in Lower Manhattan, whereas Midtown Manhattan was pretty much tailor-made for a skyscraper. Not only that, but the view is also a huge factor in the success of the Empire State Building. From the top floors, you have a clear view of most of Manhattan, which has made the observation deck one of the most popular tourist attractions in the city. Over the years, the Empire State Building has also taken advantage of its prime location by offering helicopter rides from the roof. In fact, for a while, the Empire State Building was the only building in the city that was legally allowed to offer helicopter rides. Needless to say, this has been another major source of income for the Empire State Building. So considering the amazing location, you would think that the Empire State Building wouldn't need much else to become profitable. And that would be true if it wasn't for one thing: the Great Depression. When the stock market crashed in 1929, the US economy fell into a deep depression and real estate prices plummeted. Like many other buildings, the Empire State Building saw a decrease in rental income during the early 1930s, but unlike other buildings, it didn't take long for things to recover. See, the Empire State Building was a status symbol for New York City and the US as a whole. Having such a prestigious building fall victim to the Great Depression would have been a national embarrassment, so efforts were quickly made to stabilize the building and improve its image. In 1934, the Port of New York leased the Empire State Building for 45 years for the price of $1.01. This deal included the cost of maintenance and provided the owners with a steady stream of income. The Port Authority then spent millions of dollars improving the building and turning it into a profitable venture. One of the ways they did this was by turning the 86th floor into an observation deck. This has proven to be a brilliant move, as millions of people visit the observation deck every single year. They even went ahead and built an art gallery on the 79th floor. And while all these renovations helped make the Empire State Building profitable again, it wasn't all smooth sailing. In the 1940s, the Port Authority wanted to demolish the Empire State Building and replace it with a new skyscraper. Fortunately, the plan was abandoned after they realized how popular the observation deck had become. But this still left the Empire State Building in a precarious position. The lease with the Port Authority was set to expire in 1980, and there were rumors that the Port Authority would once again try to demolish the building. But in the late 1960s, the public sentiment towards the Empire State Building changed. The building, which was once seen as a relic of the past, was now seen as a historic landmark. In 1966, the New York State Board of Regents designated the Empire State Building as a National Historic Landmark, and 2 years later, it was named a New York City landmark. These designations prevented the building from being demolished and ensured that it would be preserved for future generations. In the meantime, the Empire State Building continued to thrive. In 1980, the lease with the Port Authority was set to expire, and negotiations began for a new lease. But before the negotiations could be concluded, a fire broke out on the 79th floor art gallery. The fire caused significant damage to the building and raised concerns about its safety. The Port Authority took advantage of this to renegotiate the lease terms, but the owners of the building refused to accept the new terms. This led to a legal battle between the two parties, but ultimately the owners of the Empire State Building prevailed. In the end, the Empire State Building was able to negotiate favorable lease terms and secure its future for decades to come. Today, the Empire State Building is owned by the Empire State Realty Trust, a publicly traded company, and it doesn't look like the profitability of the Empire State Building will decline anytime soon. The iconic building continues to attract top tenants and tourists from all over the world, and that's the story of the genius economics of the Empire State Building. If you enjoyed this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up. Also, please consider subscribing. We have a ton of other videos that you might enjoy. Thanks for watching.